Heading out to get some supplies for teaching Awana tonight. Let's go get some Dominoes. Not the pizza, but like the toy Dominoes. We're back. Welcome to day 24 of the J137 vlog. We're going to look at Genesis chapter 38 through 40 today, while we spray paint some dominoes. In chapter 38, we find the story of Judah and Tamar, and Judah decided to take for himself a wife from the Canaanites, and when he took this wife, she bore him three sons, Onan, and Shelah. And then he found a wife for his oldest, and her name is Tamar. But because thought was wicked, he killed him. And therefore, because of the cultural norms back then, Onan took Tamar to be his wife. Just in these stories, there's some graphic content, so if you're watching this with your kids or kids in general, just be aware. And you might want to skip ahead, or it's up to you. Because they weren't going to be his offspring, Onan, before he would into Tamar, he would pull out and the semen would go on the floor. Why is this so hard to get? Okay, there we go. Then God killed him because God saw that as evil. And the next son in line, Shelah, he was still too young. So Tamar stayed in Judah's house as a widow until Shelah would be of age to be able to conceive children with her. But then Judah's wife died, and he was very sad, and Tamar deceived Judah by basically dressing up as a prostitute and sleeping with her father-in-law, essentially. But he didn't know it was her. After a few months, Judah was looking for what he had used as payment for the prostitute, aka Tamar, his daughter-in-law. He went looking for them, Tamar had them, and basically he said that my sin is worse than your sin, Tamar. She conceived, bore twins, one of which was Perez, which actually would be the one through whom the tribe of Judah would come through. Alright, we'll let those dry for a bit. Then in chapter 39, the story goes back to dealing with Joseph, and Joseph has now been sold to Potiphar's house by the Ishmaelites to be a servant in Potiphar's house, who is a very well-known and respected Egyptian guy. Because the Lord has favor upon Jacob, Potiphar's giving Jacob all these added responsibilities, and he's flourishing and growing and being blessed in the midst of being a servant in Potiphar's house. What also is in Potiphar's house is a wife who wants to get it with Joseph. She says, "Lie with me." He says, "No." Then one day he's working in the house by himself. She approaches him, says, "Lie with me," and he just books it, and as he's booking it, she grabs his outer garment and basically uses that as evidence to twist the story and say that Joseph tried to lay with me, we need to throw him in prison, and Joseph is thrown into prison. Then in chapter 40, Joseph is in prison because he is falsely accused, but even in prison, the Lord blesses him and he finds favor and seems to have these responsibilities with the jailer. And one day, both Pharaoh's cupbearer and his baker get thrown into prison. And one of these nights they're in prison, each of them have a dream. Now the dream that the cupbearer had was to be interpreted by Joseph as the cupbearer being restored back into the service of the Pharaoh and being in favor with Pharaoh. But then the dream that the baker had was to be interpreted by Joseph by showing that the baker was going to be hanged in a few days by Pharaoh. So that's exactly what happens. And the cupbearer, he lives, and the baker, he dies. You know, some of these stories are just intense. I'll be honest with you guys. Like when you look at Judah and Tamar and all that happened there, and just how just gross and yucky that is, some of these passages are hard to swallow. Even Joseph being falsely accused is difficult for us to grasp when God is good and sovereign and blessing him. Why, if God was blessing him in Potiphar's house, why would he have this situation where he's sent to prison? But what I find interesting, and both these stories communicate this, is this idea, once again, that we find in Genesis 50, verse 20, that what man has intended for evil, God will use for good. That although these are situations where really bad stuff are happening, that God eventually, in some way or another, redeems these situations. We know this is the story of Joseph, that eventually, very soon, we'll read that he will be then second in command in Egypt. And even in the story of Judah, with Judah and Tamar, we find that, you know, like Judah, I get it. Your wife died, but it's not a good idea to go looking for a prostitute. You know, that's bad in of itself. Then his daughter-in-law presenting herself in that way. And, you know, while there were absolutely cultural things back then that rendered the necessity to marry within certain familial relationships, this father-in-law, daughter-in-law relationship, this was not one of those. This is not good. And yet through it were born these twins, Perez in particular, through which would come the tribe of Judah. And there's a very important figure that would come from the tribe of Judah. And there's this dude named David. And then who would come from the lineage of David is eventually the Messiah. And we see that Christ, he has a very messed up and crazy heritage, but God is using all of these people that you and I would see as there's no way God could use these people to ultimately accomplish His will. This in no way justifies all those actions and those things those people are doing, but it rather just shows God's power and His control, that He is above those things. And even in being above those things, He's gracious to the people that are doing those things. You know, it's just all kind of craziness in these stories. But it's encouraging to see that in spite of the craziness, God is in control. And God even uses the crazy to bring about good. I really hope this Domino's idea works that I have. I'll film it tonight and see if it works.